We live in an age where happiness has become a performance. Everywhere we turn, Instagram feeds, TikTok dances, motivational slogans, people are smiling, laughing, radiating joy. The message is loud and clear. To be happy is not just desirable, it is mandatory. To appear unhappy is to fail at life itself. And so, millions put on their masks. But behind those curated smiles lies something darker. Anxiety, loneliness, and despair are at historic highs. Antidepressant prescriptions rise every year. Entire generations describe themselves as lost, disconnected, and unfulfilled. Yet scroll through their profiles and you would never know. We are a society dressed in joy, while beneath the costume lies an epidemic of silent suffering. Carl Jung once wrote, "The greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived lives of the parents." But this tragedy extends far beyond the family. It is the tragedy of entire civilizations. We live lives dictated not by authenticity but by appearances. To admit unhappiness is to admit weakness. To struggle is to reveal vulnerability. And so, we learn to conceal, to suppress, to pretend. This isn't merely a problem of social media. Pretending to be happy has been part of human history for centuries. Ancient philosophers spoke of the masks we wear to navigate society. Court jesters laughed in the presence of kings while hiding their pain. Housewives of the 1950s smiled for family portraits while secretly trapped in despair. And today, the pressure has only intensified. Our suffering must remain invisible, hidden behind digital filters and forced optimism. But why do we hide our true emotions behind a facade of joy? Is it simply shame? Is it fear of rejection? Or is there something more sinister, an unspoken cultural demand that commands us to conform? When Jung studied the human psyche, he discovered that repression is rarely a conscious choice. We bury our suffering because we fear what might happen if we revealed it. Society rewards the cheerful, the optimistic, the resilient. The sad and broken are pushed aside, pitted, or even shamed. And so, we pretend. We convince the world we are fine. And over time, we even begin convincing ourselves. But the cost of this deception is profound. Each smile that hides pain is a small betrayal of the self. Each performance of joy is another step away from authenticity. We lose sight of who we are, and in that loss lies the deepest tragedy of all. The haunting question remains: if so many of us are suffering in silence, then who are we really smiling for? Carl Jung believed that every human being carries within them a hidden side, a shadow. Not merely the darkness we associate with evil, but rather the collection of feelings, impulses, and truths we repress. It is the sorrow we never admit, the anger we conceal, the desires we suppress, the weakness we deny. And in our attempt to project strength, to wear the smiling mask of happiness, we feed this shadow until it grows vast and uncontrollable. At the core of Jung's theory lies the persona, the mask we present to the world. The persona is not inherently false. It is a necessary adaptation, a way to function within society. The problem arises when the mask becomes mistaken for the self, when we suppress so much of our inner reality that we begin to live entirely for appearances. A person who pretends to be happy at all costs is not simply lying to others. They are cutting off their connection to their own soul. Consider the colleague who greets everyone with a cheerful smile, who tells stories of vacations, family dinners, and success. To the outside world, this person appears to be thriving. Yet behind closed doors, they collapse into silence, consumed by depression or loneliness. The world sees the persona. Only the shadow knows the truth. History, too, is filled with such masks. Leaders who presented images of unwavering strength, only to crumble in their private writings. Consider Winston Churchill, the British bulldog who rallied a nation during World War II. Few knew he referred to his depression as the black dog that followed him relentlessly. Or Abraham Lincoln, remembered for his unshakable resolve, who privately confessed to thoughts of despair so deep he feared for his own life. These men projected resilience because society demanded it. But the shadow never disappeared. It waited, silently, beneath the surface. The danger of ignoring the shadow is not simply personal suffering. It is the slow erosion of authenticity. When people convince themselves they are happy while repressing their pain, they begin to live a double life, one outward, one hidden. Over time, the hidden life grows heavier, more unbearable. Jung warned that what we refuse to confront does not vanish. It seeps into our behavior in subtle, destructive ways. The cheerful man who insists everything is fine may secretly drink himself into oblivion at night. The endlessly optimistic woman may lash out at her children with anger she cannot explain. Society encourages this cycle. From childhood, we are told to be strong, to put on a brave face, to smile through the pain. These messages, though well-intentioned, teach us that suffering is shameful, and so people learn to bury it. But what is buried is not erased. It becomes the shadow, the unlived life, the suppressed truth, the neglected cry for authenticity. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The smiling mask may protect us from judgment, but it comes at the cost of our wholeness. The more we pretend, the more disconnected we become from the reality of who we are. We no longer live as ourselves. We live as an image, an echo, a hollow performance. Pretending to be happy is not simply dishonesty. It is a psychological defense mechanism, a shield against the unbearable weight of vulnerability. But like all shields, it keeps not only the world out, but also the self locked within. And in that prison of false smiles, the shadow grows, waiting for the moment it will no longer be denied. Why do we pretend to be happy? Why do we paint smiles across our faces even when our hearts are breaking? The answer lies not simply in culture or habit, but in the deep architecture of human psychology. Pretending is not a modern invention. It is an ancient survival strategy written into our evolutionary story. From the earliest tribes, humans depended on belonging. To be excluded from the group was often a death sentence. Vulnerability, weakness, or despair could mark someone as unreliable, and so people learned to conceal those feelings. A warrior who trembled with fear before battle could not afford to show it. A mother who felt crushed by grief still had to care for her children. Over generations, the ability to mask emotions became a tool for survival. It was better to hide pain than to risk rejection. Modern psychology calls this emotional labor, the effort we expend to regulate our expressions, to display emotions that may not match what we feel inside. Think of the flight attendant who smiles warmly at passengers while silently enduring exhaustion or irritation. Think of the customer service worker who is required to be endlessly cheerful, no matter the abuse they face. Their survival no longer depends on spears and fire, but on a paycheck. And the mask of happiness becomes their shield. Sociologist Irving Goffman described human life as a theater where every individual plays a role, carefully managing impressions. We curate our behavior depending on the audience. At work, we are one version of ourselves. With friends, another. Online, yet another. This impression management is not inherently sinister. It is the glue of social life. But when the distance between our performance and our reality grows too wide, something cracks. Studies in psychology have shown that faking emotions creates a phenomenon known as emotional dissonance, a painful gap between what we feel and what we show. People who are forced to display constant positivity, especially in jobs that require service or social interaction, often report higher levels of stress, burnout, and even depression. The mask becomes suffocating. The smile that once protected begins to poison. And yet we continue. We post curated photos, stage joyful moments, and tell others we are fine, even when we are not. But because conformity still governs us. The unwritten rule of society is that despair is uncomfortable, that sorrow is to be hidden, that struggle is a private matter. The person who speaks openly about their suffering is often met with silence, pity, or even avoidance. So we conceal. We smile. We play along. Carl Jung would remind us that these masks, the persona, serve a purpose. But he would also warn us that ignoring what lies beneath only strengthens the shadow. Modern research echoes this. A study from the University of South Florida found that employees forced to engage in surface acting, faking positivity they didn't feel, reported more emotional exhaustion and less job satisfaction. The attempt to hide vulnerability backfired, making them weaker, not stronger. Pretending, then, is not a minor quirk of human behavior. It is the residue of evolution, the currency of social survival, the performance demanded by culture. But the cost is steep. The more we fake, the further we drift from ourselves. And beneath every smile that isn't real, a silent dissonance grows louder, waiting to be heard. Happiness today is not merely a feeling. It has been transformed into a command, a requirement, a social duty. From billboards to Instagram feeds, from self-help books to corporate slogans, we are constantly reminded that joy is the ultimate goal of life, and that if we are not smiling, laughing, and radiating positivity, then we are somehow failing. But this was no accident. Happiness has been weaponized. Modern advertising discovered long ago that people rarely buy products for their utility. They buy them for the promise of emotional transformation. A car is not simply a vehicle, it is a symbol of freedom and status. A perfume is not just a fragrance, it is a story of seduction and confidence. A smartphone is not merely a device, it is the gateway to belonging, connection, and identity. The message is clear: buy this and you will be happy. Buy more and you will be complete. Social media intensified this illusion. Platforms built on algorithms reward smiles, sunsets, and staged moments of joy. Post a picture of grief, loneliness, or despair, and it disappears into the void, or worse, it unsettles others who would rather not confront such realities. The machine punishes authenticity and glorifies the facade. We are trained, like performers, to put on a show for an invisible audience, chasing likes as though they were evidence of our worth. This is not new. In ancient Rome, emperors understood the power of distraction. They offered bread and circuses, food and entertainment, to pacify the masses, ensuring they remained docile and compliant. Hunger and revolt were soothed with games and gladiators, with fleeting pleasures that kept deeper discontent at bay. The modern world has its own circuses, only now they are digital. Endless scrolling, curated feeds, and dopamine-driven notifications keep us entertained while the deeper issues of alienation, inequality, and despair remain hidden in the shadows. Religious institutions once played a similar role. For centuries, salvation was promised as the ultimate happiness, achievable only through obedience. Suffering was reframed as virtue, while joy was offered as a reward for conformity. In exchange for faith and submission, believers were told they would one day taste eternal bliss. The machinery of happiness has always been a mechanism of control. Today, the same dynamic persists, but under a new disguise. Governments, corporations, and media alike insist that the pursuit of happiness is our highest calling. Self-help gurus tell us to manifest positivity. Corporations preach good vibes only while exploiting workers. Politicians assure us that prosperity and consumption will solve our emptiness. Happiness is no longer an inner experience but a manufactured product, marketed and sold to keep the machinery of society running smoothly. Carl Jung warned that when societies deny their shadow, when they repress pain, darkness, and discontent, they create dangerous illusions. What we see now is exactly that illusion. A culture that cannot tolerate sadness forces its people to wear a mask. To admit despair is to be labeled weak, negative, or ungrateful. And so we smile even when we are breaking. We comply even when we are suffocating. The truth is unsettling. Happiness, as we encounter it in the modern world, often serves as propaganda. By glorifying constant positivity, society discourages dissent. By shaming sadness, it silences authentic expression. And by framing joy as a product to be purchased, it ensures the endless cycle of consumption. Those who pretend to be happy are not simply individuals making private choices. They are the byproducts of a cultural system designed to demand smiles, suppress shadows, and keep people docile. In such a world, to question the machinery of happiness is not just rebellious, it is revolutionary. The mask of happiness may look harmless, even virtuous. After all, who doesn't want to appear strong, composed, and joyful? But every mask, if worn too long, fuses with the skin. And in this fusion, something far darker takes place: the slow erosion of the authentic self. Carl Jung warned that what we repress does not disappear. It lingers in the unconscious, gathering force, waiting for the moment to return. The more one insists on appearing happy, the more one buries despair, anger, or longing. And what is buried does not rot quietly, it ferments. It grows into depression, anxiety, or even breakdowns that strike without warning. History is filled with people who seem to have it all: wealth, fame, admiration, yet collapsed under the crushing weight of their facades. Think of celebrities who projected joy to millions while privately drowning in loneliness. Musicians who filled stadiums with ecstatic crowds but later confessed to feeling utterly empty. Politicians who built careers on charisma only for their private journals to reveal despair and exhaustion. Each story is a reminder: a smile can deceive the world, but it cannot deceive the soul. The midlife crisis is one of the clearest examples of this betrayal. For decades, individuals may follow the script handed to them: study hard, build a career, start a family, display the curated symbols of success. Outwardly, everything appears perfect, but inside, the shadow grows restless. The unlived life, the passions denied, the truths suppressed, the pain ignored, begins to claw at the surface. Suddenly, the mask no longer holds. The result is often a shattering collapse. Affairs, addictions, drastic life changes, or an overwhelming sense of meaninglessness. This is the true cost of pretending to be happy. It is not simply lying to others, it is lying to oneself. And lies of this magnitude always demand payment. The betrayal is subtle at first: a quiet exhaustion, a vague emptiness, a sense that life is being lived at a distance. But over time, the consequences deepen into a form of spiritual death. Consider the tragic stories of individuals who seemed untouchable. The smiling actor whose suicide shocked the world. The beloved public figure who appeared endlessly optimistic, yet battled demons no one could see. These are not anomalies, they are extreme expressions of a universal truth. When we deny our suffering, it turns inward, becoming poison. Jung described this as a violation of the process of individuation, the journey toward becoming whole. To repress pain is to amputate part of the self. And when one amputates enough, life itself loses meaning. The endless performance of joy does not protect us, it imprisons us. The haunting paradox is this: the smile that reassures others becomes the very thing that kills us inside. It is not just a mask worn for society, but a betrayal of the soul's demand for truth. And like all betrayals, it leaves scars. The question that lingers is chilling: how much of yourself can you hide before nothing real is left to save? Carl Jung's answer to the epidemic of false happiness was not to strip away suffering or pretend the shadow does not exist. His vision was far more radical: to embrace it. Jung argued that the goal of psychological health is not perfection, but wholeness. To live authentically, one must stop performing a role and begin confronting the raw material of the psyche: the light, the darkness, and everything in between. For Jung, happiness was never about the absence of pain. It was about the ability to carry pain with dignity, to weave suffering into the fabric of meaning. He saw repression as the great danger, because whatever we deny in ourselves does not vanish, it festers. But when we integrate those disowned parts, something transformative occurs. Life ceases to be a performance and becomes an unfolding journey of truth. This process is what Jung called individuation. Unlike the persona, the mask we wear to please society, individuation calls us to remove the facade and face our contradictions directly. A person who begins this path does not ask, "How can I appear happy?" Instead, they ask, "What is real within me, even if it terrifies me to admit it?" To individuate is to walk through the wilderness of the self, to encounter both the brilliance and the brutality that reside within. Consider the lives of great artists and thinkers who chose authenticity over acceptance. Friedrich Nietzsche, whose writings burned with a refusal to conform, spoke of joy not as a shallow optimism but as an affirmation of life in all its suffering. Vincent van Gogh, tormented and unstable, poured his anguish into paintings that, though unappreciated in his lifetime, now reveal the profound beauty of a man who dared to give his torment form. Even in literature, figures like Dostoevsky transformed personal despair into novels that explore the darkest chambers of human psychology, yet leave readers with a strange sense of liberation. These individuals remind us that true joy is not found in constant cheerfulness but in authenticity. To embrace the shadow is to reclaim power from the illusions of society. A man who acknowledges his despair is freer than one who hides behind endless smiles, because his life is no longer built on deceit. He does not need to maintain the exhausting facade. He can be real, even if that reality unsettles others. Jung believed that integrating the shadow does not make us saints, it makes us whole. A person who has confronted their anger, jealousy, and grief no longer fears them. Instead, these emotions become sources of insight, creativity, and resilience. By contrast, a person who denies them becomes their prisoner. In practical terms, this means learning to drop the mask, to admit weakness without shame, to express sorrow without apology, to recognize joy not as a permanent state, but as a fleeting yet meaningful companion in the larger journey of existence. When people embrace this way of living, their happiness becomes deeper and more durable, not because it excludes suffering, but because it includes it. Ordinary examples are just as powerful. The man who stops pretending to love his career and begins painting at night, discovering a joy hidden for decades. The woman who no longer hides her grief after loss, but speaks it aloud, finding strength in honesty rather than silence. The young adult who stops chasing approval online and accepts solitude as the price of self-discovery. Each demonstrates the same principle. When the mask falls, the soul breathes. The liberation Jung envisioned is not comfortable. It often means losing approval, defying expectations, and walking a lonelier path. But in that very discomfort lies a profound freedom. To live authentically is to accept that life is tragic and beautiful, joyful and sorrowful, sacred and chaotic, all at once. And in embracing these contradictions, we discover a form of happiness that cannot be sold, performed, or faked. This is Jung's cure, not to eradicate the shadow, but to welcome it into the circle of the self. Only then does joy stop being an illusion. Only then can a smile mean something real. We began with the image of the smile, the universal mask, polished and rehearsed, worn by millions to conceal wounds that society would rather not see. Behind those carefully arranged expressions lie private battles, quiet despair, and the suffocating pressure to appear fine, no matter the truth. The smile becomes a prison, one that demands obedience to a culture intoxicated with surfaces, while silencing the voice that cries from within. But to reject that performance is to step into dangerous territory. True happiness is not safe, not tidy, not compliant. It demands rebellion against the illusion that life is meant to be easy, cheerful, or painless. To stop performing joy is to threaten the very structures, corporate, cultural, even familial, that depend on our silence and conformity. Systems thrive on masks. They collapse when too many people dare to take them off. This is why authenticity feels like a risk. It can cost friendships, careers, reputations. It can strip away the comfort of belonging. A society addicted to false smiles will treat the honest man or woman as a heretic. Yet this heresy is also liberation. Because when the mask shatters, something more powerful than approval emerges: truth. Carl Jung understood this paradox. He warned that whatever is repressed does not disappear but returns with force, demanding recognition. He also believed that the courage to face our own darkness, to integrate the shadow, is the only path toward wholeness. In this confrontation, joy is reborn, not the shallow joy of performance, but a joy rooted in reality. A joy that coexists with sorrow, tragedy, and imperfection, yet does not break under their weight. History reminds us that those who dared to live authentically, from prophets to artists to philosophers, often paid the price of rejection. Yet they also carved paths of meaning that could never have been found in the safety of pretense. Their lives testify that authenticity is dangerous precisely because it dismantles illusions. But it is this very danger that makes it worth embracing. The smile will always tempt us with its easy comfort, its social approval, its promise of belonging. But real happiness does not come from rehearsed gestures. It arises in the silent moment when we stop lying to ourselves, when we face the mirror without flinching, when we embrace the contradictions that make us human. Happiness is not a mask you wear. It is the light that appears when you dare to confront your own darkness.